Welcome to the Trustbound Podcast. All right, here we go. Another episode of the Trustbound Podcast. This time around with another special guest. I guess I keep saying that every single person that comes that has come and hopefully that will come on board and join me in one of these sessions is a very, very special guest. But today we have Gabriel Tudela, a great friend and co-founder of Landa. Gabriel Chuco, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
No, thank you for the invite, Mao. You know that I especially like our relationship because part of it is work, part of it is just trust and just being a natural friend. The reality is you've been a very good mentor for the Landa Club community for I mean like three editions now. You were part of the early cohorts, so yeah, happy to be here, happy to help with whatever I can.
Beautiful. Um, for everybody listening, I guess tell us a little bit more about yourself. What do you do at Landa?
Absolutely. Do you want me to go way back or just what I do in Landa specifically?
Um, let's go way back. Pedro
Sure.
was part of the podcast 2 episodes ago. Uh, I guess I won't say anything else because this
Let's
is
do it.
being recorded before Pedro's episode comes out live. So there is no,
No spoilers.
yeah, no spoilers, nothing at all.
Let's do
But
it.
yeah, if you want to take us way back, let's go way back.
Let's do it. Beautiful. Needs to go way back. I feel like to understand where we stand now. So for all of you who don't know me, I'm Peruvian. I've been living in Mexico City for the past 8 years. I go a little bit professional as well. So my career started in consulting. That was my first gig in EY, one of the big four. Kind of hated every moment. It gave me a pretty good structure. Quickly transitioned into the tech industry, right? As an operator, as a founder. So I've held operational and executive role. Let's call it in four unicorns now, which is like the sexy term at the moment. So Uber, Bird, Kavak, and Lamudi. Mostly what I was doing was operational product launches. Basically, aside from that, I bootstrapped two companies. I'm going to talk about Landa probably a little bit more after. But the first one is called Pay and Go LatAm. So it was a contactless payment solutions provider. I had to shut that down after 5 years because our main selling target was actually entertainment venues, right? So we sold contactless payment solutions and access control for events, basically. And obviously with COVID, that wasn't happening. So I shut it down after 5 years. And then Landa, I can go a little bit deeper after, but it's a professional membership. It's specifically for tech leaders who wish to transition into independent consulting work.
Mhm.
So essentially, the two things that we give them mostly is structure and how to get started, and then the second one is community, right? Because all the business of independent consultants is it's all about referrals, right? So 95% of leads come from referrals. So building up your network, and most importantly, building enough confidence to do external consulting work takes a tribe,
Mm.
generally speaking. So at least for me, I thought I needed to be like 60 to be able to offer advice, and it was a community that actually like demystified it for me. We built it on those two verticals, and that's essentially what I'm doing at the moment. I don't know if you want to go deeper on any of this, but this is a little bit of my story.
Beautiful. Um, you just mentioned that about 95% of leads in business, and I guess also I want to take a little bit deeper, like life connections and opportunities in our career and life happen through referrals. How, when it comes to Landa, how have you seen that element of referrals and relationship building just be a core element of the club or the group or
Yeah.
I guess the community?
Yeah, so I'll start on the business side, right? And this happens to every startup, but especially with bootstrap companies, it all starts with your network, right? So I would say, the first 25 clients for us were referrals, right? Like people who knew us, who have worked with us in the past, colleagues, mentors, bosses, etc. And the reality is that, especially with communities, the first, let's call it like 50 people set the culture for the next 5,000, right? So
Mm,
so that's a big reality for us, especially for communities. That's how I got my first clients. And then the motion starts, right? Once you get the good people, and that needs to be validated, interviewed. So you actually need to do a lot of work to actually understand, even if they're, there might be friends, but they're not, might not be in the right timing to go into like an offer like the one that we have, right? So actually like validating those points early on, trying to identify the key people who might become the champions for the future is very key. So one of our the main things for us, and we started off as a freemium service, was actually just getting those first 25 people being the right people, and we did, right. And fortunately, you were amongst the first 75, right. And getting you, we didn't know each other, but it was through a mutual connection who was already part of the club. And you got in. Now you're a mentor in edition number 2021, right, or 20 at the moment. It's going to become 21 in a month, right. So that's a reality for us as a business. And then if you think about new clients, 40+% of clients are coming from referrals. Naturally, as you start scaling a company, that's one of the channels that it's hard to scale, generally speaking. But it's all about having the right notes in the beginning, and then having those notes be able to bring new notes that add value to the community, right?
mm,
And speaking from a client's perspective, who are, valga la redundancia, like we call in Spanish, trying to find their own clients. Then we mention it all the time, right? There was a fractional survey that came up, I think it was like a year and a half ago, and the stat was 94% of clients were coming from referrals, right? And the reality is this was a survey that got sent out globally, so it's pretty consistent across Latin America, across the US. I would say even more so in Latin America, and you've seen this personally. But once you dedicate yourself to adding value to connections, people will remember you, right? And it might be something very subtle, maybe like 3 years back. But then if you can like leverage that into just saying like to the same person, like, this is where I'm at the moment. This person, if you have, proactively added value in the past, they'll think of you, right? That's the reality. And that not only includes like people who are not in your network, but also like people who have been, again, colleagues, right? Like I tried to mentor like everyone that came up in the companies that I was previously, that was at Uber, Bird, whatever. And that always comes back, right? So I would say like both from a business perspective and client perspective, it's key. It's probably like the number one thing.
mm. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, you folks haven't used paid marketing yet
Mm.
uh, in Landa. And how many members do you guys have? 500 plus?
Yeah, 500 plus, 65% of them have come from referrals.
Hmm.
I would lie. So we did a small stint on LinkedIn paid marketing,
Okay.
brought zero leads. So what I can tell you is like the 500 who actually came in were 100% like, let's call it like zero CAC. That's like not particularly true because there's like campaigns running and all that. But generally speaking, we haven't, paid a dollar in marketing, or at least have been doing it effectively to bring any leads. Yeah.
Hmm. Interesting, because it sounds like, well, I mean, over half of your members came through referrals.
Yeah.
How did you build that referral engine? And
Yeah.
in such short time, because it's been,
Three and a half years.
yeah, I guess the my mind is messing with me, but I think I've been part of Landa for what, like 2 years?
Almost 3 years, I
Almost
think. Yeah, yeah, because you were part of cohort two, right?
two. Yeah,
And
two.
that was early 2023. So yeah, 3 years.
Yeah.
Congrats on your anniversary.
Thank you. How did
But
you guys
yeah,
manage to do that? That's fucking
yeah,
impressive. Congrats.
yeah. At the end of the day, Mao, and you know this better than anybody, but it's all about the product, right? And
Hmm.
navigate and having the right people, to start with. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but at the end of the day, even if you have, a strong network, at the end of the day, if your product sucks, nobody's going to refer it, right? So it's a combination of navigating and selecting the right people to begin with, And obviously we weren't great at it, from the get-go, right? We started refining the ICP pretty thoroughly. It's funny because it's definitely shifted. That's the reality, but it's somewhat close to what we ideated. In mid 2022, we were pretty clear on who's actually going to get the most value out of it. But something that we did, and I thought was pretty smart in the beginning, was that we started off uh, more like, let's call it like free, because everybody starts free. We started charging a one-off fee, and then we started charging annual, right? And obviously there was a part of it that was, I was always taught like subscription models are like what's the future, right? That was probably the time where like SaaS was king, right? So it's all about retention, and the reality is that the second reason was actually more powerful in the end, right? Which is there needs to be a way in which people who aren't a good fit get out of the club, right? And that was beautiful for us because right now, let's call it like maybe 50% of those people, like the 500 members that came into the program, have essentially churned, right? And the reality is that they were never good clients to begin with, right? And there's a few ways to like actually get the right clients. In the beginning, it's just like an iteration process, right? And you get some signals, right? Like retention is a good signal, referral is a good signal, obviously taking the accelerator program and having results is a good signal, right? Sticking to consulting work, which is super fucking hard, is a good signal, right? So all those things are great, but the reality is, and it ended up being like, hey, who's actually willing to take out their wallet and pay for another year? That tells you the biggest signal, which is I'm willing to spend money on this again and again and again, right? And we've
Mm,
had people, paying for 3, 4 years in a row.
mm,
And now that we are pretty clear on who's the ICP, now we just do a one-off fee, right? It's a little bit higher, so there's a little bit more resistance, let's call it. But then it really filters out the good people who are going to go into your network, and then everything that comes after is pure upside, right? And that's how we shifted the model. But the reality is that having the annual recurrency in the beginning, where we knew our ICP wasn't like really polished, actually allowed us to like drop some people who weren't a good fit to begin with.
mm.
Does that respond, by the way?
Yeah, yeah, and that makes me think of another question. So I guess for for pretty much every founder, like the first you launch, nobody knows who you are. Uh, the first thing that comes to mind is, hey, I'm going to go to my network and I'm going to, I guess, navigate that network to see what people can become clients and what people can become, I
Yeah,
guess, referrers, right? That would at itogai we call them bridgers. Who are those
yeah,
people that are going to bridge that gap between me, the seller, and the, I guess, target prospect that I want to have a conversation with. But it's when it comes to relationship building, and I guess building trust, you kind of don't want to, or you kind of want to do good by that network and like protect
yeah,
that relationship. And I guess for you guys that grew mostly via referrals, how was that experience for that person that I guess showed up
hmm,
and they had an expectation, or let's assume they had an expectation because their friend told them
for
about
sure,
Landa and they had an idea in their mind, and then either it didn't work because they had the wrong expectation, because I guess
for sure.
happiness is expectations minus reality, right? And
For
I guess
sure.
they were unhappy and said, "Oh, this product sucks. This solution sucks." And maybe
Yeah,
my friend lied to me, or my friend told me great things, and then it sucked for me.
yeah,
So that's one part of the question. The other part of the question is, how did you guys manage to keep a I guess a good relationship or a good experience with not just the person that was coming in that wasn't a good fit, and telling them, hey, it sounds like this isn't a good fit for what you're looking for, or maybe doing those experimentations of just changing ICPs and then I
yeah,
guess dropping that type of user that initially was your ICP but then changed. I guess
yeah,
walk us through those experiences.
for sure. There's a lot to unpack here, right? So I would say like on the first thing, again, expectations are reality, right? Especially
Mhm.
in customers' minds, that's a reality for sure. And it's, it's been showing up like more consistently for us. The reality is that we still do all interviews, even if a person was
Okay.
referred, they're not like coming in directly, right? Like we're
Mm.
interviewing every single person, and the goal of the interview is twofold, right? Like first, understanding if you're in the right situation, if you're a good ICP for us at the moment, and the second is just that, it's just keeping expectations, right? Like trying to be super clear on where we shine, where we don't, and naturally, like, our value proposition has evolved a little bit, right? So,
Okay.
for example, one of the key aspects that we had, maybe it was like mid 2023, was something I, from the get go, I didn't want to do, but then people ask and ask and ask, and you try to deliver, right? Especially if you're bootstrap, you're like, every new revenue opportunity is the shiniest object, right? So at that point, that was, ramping up the B2B marketplace, right? And getting gigs for people. The reality is that there's two separate businesses there, right? Like B2B business, B2C business. So it didn't really work that much from the start, right? So I would say like one of the types of members that we really dropped quickly, or they self dropped, let's call it, right? Because we weren't kicking people out unless they did something wrong in the community, which, fortunately nobody did. The reality is that, the people who came in for just a transactional aspect left super quick, right? And that
Mm.
for us is a pretty clear signal, right? Not just from a business perspective, but also, which was obviously, hard to navigate two businesses, and having B2B calls and B2C calls. That was hard to manage. Also, the revenue wasn't coming in. But, pretty easily we noticed that as soon as we changed that value proposition, or were more vocal about it, these people just started dropping, right? And the reality is that if you're a very transactional minded person, right, which is basically what it means for me, is like you're extracting more than like adding value in general to the network, and that eventually leads to like just you not getting like the right leads potentially, because the reality is that when you have a dynamic of many people applying to maybe one opportunity, it becomes a little bit of a competition, right? And ultimately comes down to the company and how you pitch yourself. There's a lot of aspects that come into, having founders actually hire you for a potential gig. And naturally, like 90+% of the times you're going to get rejected, right? So if you're coming from a transactional mindset and this happens to you, you're ultimately going to be, just like disappointed in general, right? And if you come with that mindset, and especially you're not, adding value to the rest of the community, maybe like sharing resources, mentoring, for example, right? Like there's a lot of ways in which you can add value back to a community. All these folks maybe have like 5 to 10x the amount of success, right? I can just
Mm.
like count on like the mentors that we have at the moment, and everybody's probably gotten like some sort of gig, or at least like a good referral, right? And the reality is, it all comes from just being active and giving value upfront, and then things can't naturally like come back at you, right? So that's one of the profiles that we've definitely like started letting go, and it's probably one of the key questions that we make in the interviews, like is understanding like what do you want to get out of the club, right? And if they start with leads, then it's a clear sign that probably they're not a good fit.
Mm.
So I don't know if like there's multiple things that I try to answer, but we've been doing it that way. So just navigating with the right interview process, the right questions, and then being very upfront of like, this is what we do pretty well, this is what we don't do pretty well, and then in terms of referrals and how we keep the system going, right? So at the moment, since it's a for-profit business, we love referrals, but the reality is that if people are referring people who are coming and paying the program, now we actually do give a referral incentive. At the moment, we have it reserved at $50 a person that pays, and then also we're starting to empower local leaders to actually lead chapters, right? So we have a Lima chapter, we have a Bogota chapter at the moment, and obviously they have like special incentive deals because they're working more actively in the club. Uh, but yeah, that's a little bit of how we've thought about it. It's working out pretty well. So the past three cohorts, about 45% of people have come referred, and at the end of the day, it not only like sets expectations once you hop in a call, but also you have somebody who's close to you, who's a mentor, maybe a colleague, a friend, a family member, who understands the product, has gone through the experience, and then can tell you in their own perspective, right? So every time a customer comes and tells me like, oh, I know fulanito or somebody in the club, I'm like, please let's have this call, but then chat with them, right? Get a coffee, because at the end of the day, like that's my biggest review is like having somebody who's already been through experience who can tell you about the product, right?
Right. Right.
I don't know if that covers like I there was like three questions in one, and I tried to like navigate a little bit of everything. But that's a little bit of how I think about referrals and how we've like structured the process.
Awesome. And it's interesting because, we had this conversation or these conversations, because of course we it's not like we only had one conversation some time ago. And when it comes to, and even when it comes to sales, right? For people listening, and if this is your first time listening to the Trust Man podcast, I've been a seller my entire career, right? And a great friend of mine, which was also my sales leader at the time when I was at HubSpot, David Torres, he taught me this concept of, you know, in a deal, there has to be a give get, right?
Hmm.
And for every deal to have a next step, it should have a give get. It's not a one side only, right? There needs to be, um, I guess, a benefit for both sides, right? And with the way how you guys not just grown Landa, but you as a professional, that makes me think, and even the not just the ICP that changed, but also the users are really were not the best fit for the club. Were those users that were just thinking through, or the way I'm just going to verbalize what I
Yeah, yeah,
what I know, what I understand, is those users that just come on and just expect to get, and not
yeah,
either not give enough or expect to get before they give. Um,
for sure.
and there's also this concept of, you know, um, you got to deliver value to build trust, and that trust will, just open so many doors. And
For
also
sure.
for folks listening in, I've talked through this already, that every single professional experience that I've had in my career, not just as an operator, but also as an advisor, as an investor, as a mentor, as a coach, um, has had some sort of a referral in
Yep.
the middle. Chuco Gabriel just mentioned that we had never met, and in my conversation with Pedro, actually, spoiler alert, um, I did say that you messaged me on LinkedIn, sort of cold, if you will. But in my conversation with him, he was like, yeah, we were just reaching out to people that were close to us. And when I did, of course, my research of who the hell you were and noticed that you were working with Pedro, I was like, hold on. Yes, I'm going to reply, because like we have a person in the middle that that I already know, and we had already worked together when I was at HubSpot. Um, and by the way, thank you for the book. I got the book, uh, and can't wait to read it. Um,
It talks a lot about what you just mentioned, so
yeah,
you're definitely gonna dig it.
and that's where, and the go giver. Do you call yourself a connector and a go giver, and you called myself, or you called me a connector and a go giver. Um, but I guess, and this happens to me, so I guess I'd give my perspective, but I would love to ask you. I guess givers, sometimes we struggle with
Taking.
receiving,
Yep.
and and
That's the
and
last chapter in the book, by the way. Spoiler
and
alert.
taking, right, and just like accepting, and it's not so much like dropping the ego, because it's not about ego, but it's
No.
about, we always want to help, right? And it kind of feels a little bit awkward when uh, you do say, yes, I need a favor, or yes, I'll accept this
Yeah,
favor. How do you navigate that tension? I guess, how do you resolve this? And I guess that's for me to learn from the book, because I haven't read
for
it.
sure.
I just received it. But specifically, like for you and Landa, and
Yeah.
thinking through somebody that wants to aim to monetize on that favor.
Yeah, for sure. So the reality is like I would stick to that framework first, which
Hmm.
is like try to give, especially if you have the time to do it and you're an expert in that field and you can share your knowledge. That naturally feels good. I'm gonna
Mm.
tell you, right? Like that's what what it's all about. If you ask like all the biggest like millionaires, billionaires, like it's not about like the accomplishment, the cars, anything. It's like the time that they were giving or just like sharing expertise, donating. There's like multiple ways of doing this, but that's what comes like pretty like most often, I would say. And in my case, like I would approach it the same way, right? Like any time that I can share wisdom, share advice, whatever, like that's great, right? Like I feel really, really good doing it. But the reality and contrast, and you're going to see about it, you're going to see this in the book as well. But it's like we are humans and we have constraints as well, right? And one of the biggest constraints, especially when you're a founder and you know this, firsthand, but it's there is only a limited amount of time in your schedule that's available if you discount sleep, relationships, etc., right? So if I'm helping somebody out and they really want my expertise, but they want it in a more structured manner. They want like more than 5 hours a week. I'm happy to do like one call like every month or so, every like 2 weeks even, right? Because I really enjoy like helping companies. But if they want like structured help, maybe like 5 hours, 10 hours, which I'm gonna take off from my full time position, you actually need to be like very cognizant in that and just say like, hey, like this is taking me like this amount of time from my schedule. I value my hour and this amount. I'm just trying to reach a point in which like it works out for both ends. And I would say like 99% of the times it's a relief for them as well, right? So they know they're probably getting like 10x, 5x return on value based on your time. But if they can actually, they'll actually feel much better if you can actually lay out a project compensation that actually takes into account the fact that you have like again 40 hours per week, maybe sometimes more, sometimes less. But the reality is like it actually feels really good to reach a structure where the expert can get monetized, can get like compensated based on the time that they're spending on you. And then the reality is if you are picking him or her, you're probably getting like 5 to 10x, right? So it actually feels really good. I've paid like a bunch of consultants many times since I run a consultant community. I have to like tell my clients sometimes that want to help out. I'm like, okay, sure, let's do it. You want to help me with drawing on my value proposition? Let's do a structure, make a proposal, because I'm valuing your time. And then again, the worst relationships, and you've probably seen this like over and over, are the big takers who are company builders who are trying to squeeze like every minute of your time, and then you're like, hey, let's I'm maybe like spending more like 3 5 hours a week on you. Let's maybe like work on a structure that works for both ends, because this is becoming a little bit less sustainable. And if they disappear, they actually didn't value your time probably from the get-go, right? So be cognizant of that. It's the I think it's the fifth rule in that book, but it's actually being open to receiving. Because then again, giving and giving and giving opens a lot of doors, but also focus on what's a constraint to you. And the biggest one for founders and solopreneurs is your time, right? So be cognizant of that, understand your value, don't devalue your worth as well, and good things are going to come, and they're going to be happy to pay it.
Mm.
That's been my experience, and I think like I've seen this across again 250 plus active members, 500 people who are coming through the accelerator.
I absolutely love that. I absolutely love that. Um, and I guess this is feedback for me as well, because for, I guess, givers listening in. Oh, and by the way, um, I know that I am sorry I catered to people that were looking at the podcast but not listening in. So for
Mhm.
context, Chuco and Pedro, Landa co-founders, they were, and I'm very thankful to them both of gifting me the book, The Go Giver, a little story about a powerful business idea by Bob Berg and John David Mann. So thanks again. and then the other concept, and I guess again, feedback from me. Um, it sounds like in order for a not just a relationship to to be incredibly valuable to both for both people, but also make each other feel, I guess, less forced or structured or I guess bad, right? And
Mm.
for I guess real trust to flourish, um, you know, givers must become getters or takers
At some
as
point.
well, and I guess that that ends up protecting the relationship. I feel that as a giver, um, I've given a lot to my network, and um, I haven't said no to like, hey, meet this person. Hey, you should interview here. I guess in my mind, it's more of a, or it's less of a monetary component, or at least this is my experience, because
Yeah,
I guess my giver and taker or getter um, personal experience has been more in favors and intros and that kind of stuff. But just being open to accepting that favor from your
for sure.
relationship and your connection is very very important. Um, and then the
Yeah,
other thing, completely unrelated to what we were talking about, but I just with the fucking trend that's been coming along on LinkedIn and in the startup universe, and I gotta comment. I loved how you said 40 hours and not the 996 kind of
yeah, yeah, yeah.
trend 72-hour weeks. That's nuts. So I love the 40-hour concept. Um, Chuko, I guess to close, when you think of the word trust bound, what comes to mind?
Trust bound for me is, I think, like the first word that comes up is connection.
Mm,
Connections are built on trust, and I think it's a good word. I don't know what you're using it for particularly, if it's just a podcast or something else. But yeah, for me, connection, trust, relationships, all these concepts start coming to mind.
mm. And I guess, well, the podcast is, and I'll just address the question for people listening in. Uh, the podcast is a way of how can we amplify the concept of trust and relationships and trust bound mainly, right?
Hmm.
Because I thought I started, and I guess we've all lived it, but I started to just try to put a name to it, to the motion. Inbound and outbound still exist. They will
Yep.
never cease to exist, right? But the concept of trust bound is when you go outbound or when a company or a person comes inbound, but there's a referral in the middle. There's that build
Mm.
trust. There's that relationship in the middle that tells you, uh, to do something or to, either buy something, sell something, and
Yep.
that just relationships and trust, I guess, move the world. If I tell you, hey, you should go like, uh, for example, hey, dude, you're an amazing go giver. Thank you for everything that you've done for Landa. We're gonna gift you a book, and then you actually do it. And I'm like, oh shit, these guys actually followed through. And then I
Yeah,
got in the mail, and when my wife was like, what is that? It's like I have no idea. I didn't order anything, and then I got the book. It's like, no shit, these guys actually sent me the book. That is something, and of course I'm going to read it because it's like my friends are saying read it. If I tell you, hey, you should go see this movie, you should buy the CRM, you should do this and this, then I go do that. I go inbound to this business, but I wouldn't have done so if I didn't have somebody referring me to that business in the first
for
place.
sure.
So I guess that's all about Trustbound and the podcast.
I love
Um,
it. I love it. I hope that's a third category. So like inbound, outbound, and trustbound at some point.
yeah, let's see where that where life takes us. But for now,
Amazing.
thank you so much, Chuko, for being here, for your insights, and for just being such a graceful soul and such a great friend.
Likewise, that's why we sent over the book, man. You're a natural go giver. So thanks for your time. Thanks for the consistent wisdom. I will chat probably in the next couple of weeks. We're always chatting, man.
Oh yeah, another
Good to
day
see
in
you, man.
paradise, and if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. If this resonated, pay attention to where trust has already been doing the work for you. That's where momentum starts. Learn more at itogai.com. See you next time. I'm Mauricio Suarez, and this is the Trustbound Podcast.